February 7th, 2000. The most visited website on planet Earth stops existing. Yahoo, gone. There's no break-in and nothing to steal. Yahoo is simply buried, drowned under a wave of traffic so enormous that its own engineers can only sit and stare at their dashboards, watching the numbers climb past every ceiling they thought existed, unable to find where the flood is pouring in from or how to shut it off. For about an hour, the front door of the internet is bolted from the inside by someone nobody can see. Then it happens again. eBay, CNN, Amazon, Dell, the flagship storefronts of the entire new economy, switched off one by one like light switches. The FBI opens the largest cyber investigation in its history. Within days, its analysts reach the only conclusion that fits the evidence, and it's the one they least want to put on paper. This is coordinated. This is deliberate. This is an attack on the United States. They mobilize against an army, organized crime, maybe a hostile foreign government quietly testing whether it can bring the American economy to its knees from behind a keyboard. There was no army. There was a 15-year-old who still came downstairs when his mother called him to dinner. His name is Michael Kelsey. In the hidden chat rooms where he actually lived, he called himself Mafia Boy. Before this is over, you'll see the President of the United States called into an emergency summit, a billion-dollar figure splashed across every front page, and two national governments pour everything they had into hunting a professional who was never there. So how does one kid black out the biggest names on the internet in a week? And when they finally catch him, why does the answer humiliate everyone hunting him? Yahoo comes back. The traffic drains, the site reappears, and the engineers let themselves believe it was a fluke, a freak surge, a bad afternoon that would never repeat. The next day, the flood finds a new target, then another, then another. Each site simply drowns in a crowd of strangers who don't exist, more requests per second than any machine on Earth was built to answer. And the pattern doesn't just repeat, it climbs. CNN.com blinks out while its own newsroom is on air trying to report the story of websites blinking out. Anchors describing an outage they're living through at that exact second. E-Trade goes dark while people are moving real money by the second, watching transactions freeze mid-click. Buy.com gets hit on the very day it makes its stock market debut. The loudest morning in a company's life. The ticker finally lit with its name, and the website behind that name unreachable to anyone who tried the door. Count the wreckage. Yahoo, eBay, CNN, Amazon, Dell, E-Trade, ZDNet, Buy.com. One giant after the next, dark over a matter of days, and nobody could say why. Here's the part that should have frightened everyone. These were the richest technology companies on the planet, staffed by people who had helped build the internet and understood it better than almost anyone alive. They watched the graphs climb into the red and could do nothing. They couldn't filter the flood because it came from hundreds of machines at once. They couldn't trace it to a source. They couldn't even name who was doing it, only that it was being done and was still being done, and not one of them knew how to make it stop. Think about what that means. The people who ran the internet had just discovered they didn't control it. Wall Street felt it fast. An analyst who'd spent 2 years on television promising the web was the future now sat under the studio lights trying to explain why the future could be switched off by a hand nobody could find. And you could watch him hunt for a word that wouldn't panic anyone and fail. The word the coverage kept circling back to was confidence, as in the sudden, contagious loss of it. The FBI moved in. Agents pulled logs, compared attacks, and landed exactly where the panic pointed them. An act of war waged without a single soldier crossing a single border. They geared up to fight a nation. Up in Montreal, the enemy they were arming against had been called down to dinner an hour earlier and was now back at his desk, checking whether anyone online had noticed what he'd done. He never broke into one of those companies or touched a bite of their data. How does a 15-year-old flatten Yahoo without ever getting inside it? Watch him do it. The bedroom is small, a beige tower humming on a desk, a half-made bed, the glow of a monitor on a boy's face at an hour his parents think he's asleep. He can't flood Yahoo from this machine. Nowhere near the power. He doesn't try. He goes hunting for bigger ones. In the year 2000, the fattest, fastest computers sitting wide open on the internet belonged to universities. Enormous networks, monster bandwidth, and, this is the part that matters, almost no security. A university's whole job is to be open. Thousands of students, thousands of machines, doors propped open by design. To a kid hunting raw horsepower, a campus network looks like a parking lot full of cars with the keys still in the ignition. He scans. Machine after machine answers back, undefended, and onto each one he slips a small program. Quietly, dozens, then hundreds. The program does nothing. It just waits, invisible and patient, listening for one instruction from the boy who planted it. By the time he's finished, he owns an army of hundreds of computers that have no idea they've been drafted. Then he gives the order. One line typed into the dark, one press of a key by a kid who should be asleep. And every one of those hijacked machines, all at once in the same split second, turns and fires every ounce of its bandwidth at a single website. That's the entire weapon. Picture a store with one front door. On a normal day, customers wander in one at a time, browse, buy, leave. Now picture 10,000 people sprinting at that single door in the same instant, packing the doorway with their bodies until it's a solid wall of flesh and no real customer can squeeze through. The shelves are untouched, the register is full, but the store is dead, choked shut from the outside by a mob that came only to stand there. Point a few hundred university machines at Yahoo and Yahoo drowns. Its engineers see a billion knocks at once and no way on earth to tell the real visitors from the fakes, because every fake arrives looking like it comes from somewhere legitimate. A college in one state, a research lab in another. One flood pouring from hundreds of directions and no single wire to cut. And notice what never happened here. He never got inside Yahoo. He didn't need to. There was no password to crack and no vault to open, because the giants of the web had never built any. In 2000, they had spent their money on one thing, getting big, fast. More servers, more features, more customers, land grab after land grab. Not one of them had spent $1 on the possibility that someone might simply try to shove them over. Why would they? Nobody ever had. Yahoo had left a doorway where a door should have been, and he walked straight through it. That's why the best engineers on the planet could only sit there while their servers choked. You can't defend against a weapon you've never imagined. You can't patch a hole you refuse to believe exists. The reason nothing stopped him is the same reason the FBI kept reaching for the idea of a foreign army, because the alternative, that the entire new economy was standing in the open with its back turned, was almost too embarrassing to say out loud. Say it plainly. The attack that panicked Wall Street and dragged the FBI to war needed nothing rare. A pile of somebody else's computers, the nerve to point them all the same way at the same time. He even gave the operation a name, Project Revolta, Italian for riot, which leaves the only question that matters now. If it wasn't a state, and it wasn't the mob, who is this kid, and why aim a weapon like that at the whole planet? Michael Calci is 15 years old, living in the West Island of Montreal. Split-level houses, hockey nets bolted to the ends of driveways, minivans cooling in the garages. The war room the FBI is hunting is a bedroom down a carpeted hallway. The command center is the tower on the desk, beside the half-made bed. Picture his day. At school, he is no one in particular. A quiet kid who moves through the hallways without turning a single head. The boy teachers forget the second the bell rings. He comes home, drops his backpack by the door, and climbs the stairs to the one place that ever made him feel visible. His father had bought him a computer when he was barely old enough to spell the commands. By 15, it had become a way out of a life where he was ordinary and into the IRC channels where he was already becoming a name. Those channels were his real neighborhood. Rooms crowded with other handles, where your birth name meant nothing and your reputation meant everything. And the fastest way to matter was to do something no one else on earth could do. He never made a cent off any of it. There was nothing to steal and no one to ransom. Money had nothing to do with it. He wanted to be somebody. I wanted, he'd say years later, to be number one. Picture the night it worked. He points the borrowed machines at Yahoo, presses the key, and switches to the other window, the chat room, the only room whose opinion he cares about. For a minute, nothing. Then someone types that Yahoo won't load. Then someone else. Then the whole channel realizes it isn't their connection. It's Yahoo, and it is gone. The handles start scrolling faster than he can read them. Somebody asks the question he's waited his whole short life to be asked. "Is this you?" He lets it hang a second. Then he types 3 words. "Yeah, that was me." And the room detonates. The closest thing to a standing ovation a 15-year-old alone in a dark bedroom will ever get. His mother calls him down to dinner in the middle of it. He goes, eats, answers her questions about his day with the biggest secret on the internet sitting behind his teeth, then climbs back upstairs to do it again, and bigger, because for the first time in his life, he is not no one. He is the most powerful person in the only world he cares about, and nobody can touch him. Between that boy at the dinner table and the catastrophe the world believed it was living through lay a gap wide enough to be measured in billions, and it was about to be. The FBI's own estimate of the damage eventually landed on a staggering figure, $1.7 billion. It became the headline in every paper on Earth, a number that enormous pinned, though nobody knew it yet, to a 15-year-old who did the whole thing between the last bell and dinner. Remember that number. Its punchline is coming. Because the response was about to reach a place no cyber attack had ever dragged it before. 9 days after Yahoo first went dark, the President of the United States called a meeting at the White House. Bill Clinton gathered the leading minds in technology and the chief executives of the companies that had just been knocked offline, sat them in one room, and asked the question the whole country was asking. How do we protect ourselves from this? The first presidential summit of its kind in the history of the country. Over an outage that had lasted, at Yahoo, about an hour. 1 hour of downtime, enough to summon a president, and every person around that table. The CEOs, the security chiefs, the FBI leadership drawing battle plans against a phantom foreign enemy, was, at that exact moment, being outrun by a kid who was probably upstairs in Montreal telling strangers online that, yeah, that was him. Now the machine turned. The FBI, working hand-in-hand with Canada's National Police, the RCMP, spun up a 2-country manhunt for what everyone still firmly believed was a professional. A ghost who'd flooded the web's biggest names and then evaporated. There was no trail left on the wire to follow him home, which meant the only way to catch a ghost this good was to wait for the one mistake his pride would never let him stop making. The FBI and the RCMP had a problem they couldn't even see. Every assumption in the case pointed at the wrong kind of man. They were hunting an organization, a pro, someone with resources and tradecraft and the discipline to bury his tracks the way a nation-state operative buries his. And that is the shadow they chased, dissecting each attack for the fingerprint of a foreign power, burning down lead after lead that dead-ended because they were the wrong leads for the wrong enemy entirely. The technical trail was stone cold. He'd routed the whole flood through those borrowed university machines, so the attacks seemed to pour in from everywhere on Earth except the one bedroom he actually sat in. In the logs, nothing pointed home. Had this case turned on forensics alone, he might have stayed a ghost for years. So the agencies quit trying to outthink a professional who was never there. They went wide. They waited. Cross-border wiretaps went up on the underground channels where hackers gathered to trade code and to brag, and then it became the most boring kind of police work there is. Men in headphones, waiting for a voice. Picture the room. A little after 2 a.m, in an office somewhere in Montreal, an RCMP officer sits in front of a screen scrolling green text, a coffee gone cold and skinned over at his elbow, headphones clamped tight over his ears while 100 handles he will never meet argue in real time about the attacks the whole planet is arguing about. Most nights it's nothing. Bragging, insults, kids. He tags the interesting lines and drives home at dawn. He has no idea that the entire 2-country manhunt is about to be won on his shift, off one line of text, from one handle that cannot make itself stop talking. 2 national governments, cocked and aimed like a cannon at a target they'd never once managed to find. And the target? He could not shut up. There's a trap wired into doing something impossible purely for status. The status is worthless the second nobody knows it was you. What's the point of switching off Yahoo and Amazon to impress a chat room, and then never telling the chat room? Mafia Boy talked. He haunted the rooms where his whole social world lived, and he claimed it, all of it, making certain the people who mattered to him knew, beyond any doubt, exactly who was behind the outages the whole world couldn't explain. One night, the room went wrong. A handle he didn't recognize sat in the channel saying nothing. For a few seconds, the back of his neck went cold. Someone reading who shouldn't be, someone writing it all down. He stared at the cursor. His hands hovered over the keys. Then a friend cracked a joke. The feed scrolled on, and the cold drained out of him. He was 15. He typed the next line before the fear had finished leaving the room. And then, he made the mistake that ends the story. He didn't just claim the attacks after the fact. He got out ahead of one. In the chat room, he talked about hitting Dell, named the target out loud, before Dell's outage was public, before the news had it, before anyone outside the operation could possibly have known it was coming. There is exactly one kind of person who can name a victim before the victim knows it's been hit, the one doing the hitting. Everyone else could only react. He predicted, and the vast machine that had spent weeks swinging blindly at a phantom suddenly didn't need to be brilliant at all. It needed one tired officer in a headset, on the right channel, at the right second, writing down a name. He told on himself, and he had no idea. A boast in a chat room is only words on a screen, worthless in a courtroom until you can tie those words to a real person, at a real address, on a real phone line. That is exactly what the wiretaps were built to do. Match the boasting handle to the traffic to a connection, the connection to a house. And when the thread finally pulled tight, it didn't lead to a bunker or a foreign server farm. It led to a residential street in a Montreal suburb, a phone line registered to a married couple, and a bedroom at the top of a staircase. Somewhere in that operation, an analyst ran the name on the phone account, then the birth date attached to it, and read the year twice because it couldn't be right the first time. He sat with it a moment. Then he carried the sheet down the hall to a task force that had spent weeks wargaming a foreign power, and he said the number out loud. 15. The man they'd been chasing across an international border was in the 9th grade. Nobody in the room had a thing worth saying because there is no clean way to tell a table full of federal agents they'd aimed a cannon at a boy who hadn't finished growing. The house sat in Ile Bizarre, part of that same quiet West Island. An ordinary street where the biggest drama most nights was whose turn it was to drag the bins to the curb. A running garden hose counted as an emergency. April 2000, just after dawn. Fists on the front door. Flat, official, loud enough to wake the whole house in a single heartbeat. The porch light snaps on. Michael's parents come downstairs in their robes, half asleep, and open the door on officers holding a warrant. Officers asking for their son by the name on his birth certificate, not the handle glowing 3 rooms away on a screen. Upstairs, Michael surfaces from sleep into a doorway full of strangers. The chat room, the boasting, Dell. He puts it together a beat too late, and the blanket is suddenly damp under his palms and he can hear his own pulse going in his ears. Where does a 9th grader in his socks run? Nowhere. He watches a stranger lift the beige tower, the one machine that ever made him somebody, and zip it into an evidence bag. His hands are shaking before he understands why. Cold metal closes over wrists that still look like a child's. He says nothing. There's no one in this room worth impressing. Out in the hallway, his mother keeps asking the same question. First in French, then in English, then in French again. What did you do? What could you possibly have done? The words tumbling over one another, while 2 governments walk her son and his computer out into the gray morning. Nobody answers her. The answer is too strange to fit in a hallway. A president had convened a summit over him. A task force had drawn up battle plans for the foreign army that turned out to be him. And here he was, on the edge of a twin bed, 16 next birthday, watching a stranger coil the cable of his one trophy and carry it down the stairs. Here's what none of them ever quite admitted. The nerve that let him aim a fire hose of stolen bandwidth at Yahoo and calmly press go was the same nerve that walked him into a chat room to take a bow. His method had no flaw for the FBI to exploit. His personality did. The thing that built the attack is the thing that ended it. The Phantom had a face now. Young, ordinary, unremarkable, which left the system standing over the strangest problem of the whole affair. What do you actually do with him? What's the right punishment for the child who caused the $1.7 billion attack, panicked Wall Street, and pulled the president into a room full of CEOs? The answer is where the whole thing finally falls apart. The case went to court in Montreal, and it became a circus. Cameras on the courthouse steps, headlines in every paper, a whole country squinting at the story and trying to decide what it was even looking at. A genuine menace? Or a smart-mouthed kid who'd gotten spectacularly out of his depth? The press grabbed the easy version on day one. Bratty teenager needs a hard lesson. Set it aside. What was really happening in that courtroom was a system trying and failing to find a consequence proportionate to a crime it had never seen and did not understand. He pleaded guilty to more than 50 separate counts, covering the whole cascade of attacks on those household name sites. 50 counts, for the week that summoned a president. Then came the sentence: a two-nation manhunt and a billion-dollar headline and a White House summit had all been quietly building toward. 8 months. 8 months in what the court calls open custody. A youth group home, a year of probation, a ban on unsupervised internet, and a fine so small it embarrassed the headlines beside it. Watch what those 8 months took from him. He was barely 16 the night the group home door locked behind him, and the room on the other side belonged to somebody else's idea of a room. A narrow bed, a window that opened halfway, a hallway light that stayed on after his own went out. Lights out came at a fixed hour. The ordinary things a teenager does without thinking now needed a supervisor's initials. The kid who had made Yahoo vanish with a single line now raised his hand to ask if he could stay up. And some nights, half asleep, he'd reach off the edge of the mattress for a keyboard that wasn't there. Fingers closing on cold sheet, then the wall, then nothing, and pull his hand back and lie still and reach again an hour later. No chat room scrolling his name, no one at all. His mother sat through the reading of all 50 counts, one after another. The same woman who'd stood in that dawn hallway with no idea what her son had done. Now she had the answer, and it was small enough to fit inside a single sentence. She still had to watch a guard walk her 16-year-old out a side door while the cameras waited. And here is the punchline to that famous number. When the case finally reached court and somebody had to add up the real receipts, the provable damage, the documented stand-up-and-prove-it cost, turned out to be a sliver of the headline figure. A few $1 million, not a couple of billion. The $1.7 billion had always been fear wearing the costume of a number, and now, under oath, the number shrank to what it had actually been all along. A punishment is supposed to match the harm. But strip this case to the studs and the harm was mostly a fright. A teenager who found an unlocked door, and $100 billion companies that had left it standing wide open. The sentence was the small consequence. The large one had already detonated, out in the world, in the span of a single week. What did that week actually do? Start with what almost everyone got wrong, including the people who told the story afterward. He didn't break the internet. The sites came back, most within hours, data intact, cables uncut. When the flood stopped, the water drained off, and every one of those sites looked exactly as it had the day before. And yet nothing was the same. He'd left every server standing and cracked the one thing underneath them, the assumption the whole new economy had been resting on without ever testing it. The internet everyone was pouring their money and their futures into was defended by essentially no one, and a 9th grader had just proven it in front of the entire watching world. That White House summit, the first presidential cybersecurity meeting in history, wasn't an overreaction. A 15-year-old had just shown the reaction was overdue. In the years after, companies that had never spent a serious dollar guarding their websites began treating the web as a threat surface, something to be watched, hardened, guarded around the clock by people paid to be paranoid. The multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity industry that now wraps around every company you touch grew in large part from one week's realization. A kid could switch off Yahoo anytime he felt like it. And the kid himself? The phantom the FBI hunted as a foreign army grew up to work the very field he'd accidentally helped invent. He became a security consultant, one of the people companies now pay to break in first on purpose, so the next kid can't. In 2008, he put his own name on a book about the whole affair, titled with slightly savage honesty, Mafia Boy, How I Cracked the Internet and Why It's Still Broken. The hunted became the hired. Look at the internet you're using this very second. Locked down, monitored, paranoid by default, guarded at every layer by an industry that assumes every hour of every day that someone out there is trying to knock the whole thing over. That fortified, suspicious internet is the one his week built. He came for a chat room's applause. For 7 days in February 2000, he got it. The most powerful person on the network, important enough to pull a president into a room. And it cost him a beige computer zipped into an evidence bag and 8 months of raised hands and supervised lights out. He walked away with empty pockets and left the giants he'd embarrassed stronger than he found them, because he scared them into growing up. Which leaves one question worth arguing about long after this video ends. That week in February 2000, when the front door of the internet swung open and the whole watching world finally saw inside, who was actually exposed? The 15-year-old in the bedroom? Or the giants who never saw him coming? If this story got you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel. And if you want to see what happens when a hacker sets out to break something on purpose and nearly takes down an entire country's internet doing it, that story is waiting on screen right now. Tap it. I'll see you there.